She walked into the wrong suite of a billion-dollar cruise ship, fell asleep, and 2 hours later woke up face-to-face with the ex who left her at the altar 14 years ago, not knowing he's also the secret father of her triplets. The port of Miami shimmered under the late afternoon sun, the kind of golden blaze that made glass towers sparkle and palm fronds sway like dancers rehearsing for the world's gaze. On the horizon, the Infinity Experience dominated the skyline, dwarfing every other vessel anchored nearby. Cameras flashed in a staccato rhythm as reporters, influencers, and dignitaries crowded the docks, all desperate for a glimpse of the most expensive cruise ship ever launched. At the heart of the spectacle was Ava Carter, the woman who had built an empire from ashes. She had rehearsed every step of this day, the speeches, the ribbon-cutting, the gracious smiles before journalists who had transformed her story into a legend of resilience. Yet even legends had human limits, and Ava had barely slept for 3 days. She had toured the vessel with investors, soothed nervous engineers, and fielded last-minute calls from sponsors who wanted their logos illuminated on digital billboards floating above Biscayne Bay. Now, wrapped in a sleek ivory dress that clung to her frame like armor, she navigated the maze of corridors leading to her private suite. But exhaustion blurred her sense of direction. The Infinity was a floating city, each deck layered with mirrored halls and gilded carpets. She carried her tablet and a thin clutch, mind racing with numbers and names, when she stopped before a suite door gleaming with brass letters, V12. She thought it was hers, keyed in the access code delivered earlier by her assistant, and heard the reassuring click of the lock. Relief softened her shoulders. At last, a sanctuary. Inside, the suite exuded opulence. Marble floors, a panoramic window framing the Atlantic like a painting, and a chandelier designed to mimic constellations. Ava let out a breath that sounded more like surrender than victory. She slipped off her heels, set her clutch on the glass table, and lowered herself onto the sofa. The cushions swallowed her, inviting her body to yield. She told herself she would only close her eyes for a minute, only long enough to gather strength for the gala awaiting her in a few hours. The minutes stretched. The hum of the air system lulled her. The ocean's rhythm beyond the glass seemed to rock her into a trance. Memories, half-dreamed, crept from the corners of her mind. Snow falling over Boston streets, the echo of church bells, and a note scrawled in handwriting she once knew better than her own. She fought the images, but fatigue pulled her deeper. Within moments, Ava Carter, CEO of Carter Global Experiences, fell asleep in a stranger's suite. When she awoke, it wasn't to the hum of the ship or the quiet of solitude. It was to the sensation of being watched. Her eyelids fluttered open, and for a heartbeat, she believed she was still dreaming. Standing in the doorway, tall and motionless, was Ethan Whitmore. His presence was as shocking as cold water on bare skin. 15 years had passed, but recognition required no effort. His frame was broader, his jawline harsher, and the streaks of gray at his temples lent him a gravity his 20-something arrogance had lacked. Yet his eyes, icy blue, sharp enough to pierce, were unchanged. Ava's throat closed, the air heavy between them. She sat upright, smoothing her dress as if composure could erase the vulnerability of having been caught asleep. "Ava," Ethan said, voice lower, rougher than she remembered. It carried the same blend of authority and distance that had once made her feel both chosen and discarded. She swallowed hard, summoning steel into her spine. "This is my suite," she lied reflexively, though the flicker of surprise in his gaze told her the truth was already written in the awkwardness of her presence there. "No," he replied, stepping further inside, his tailored suit cutting a silhouette against the light. "This is mine." Her chest tightened. Of all the doors on this floating metropolis, she had walked into his. Destiny, or cruelty, had orchestrated their reunion. Ava's mind raced with the cascade of consequences. She had built her empire on the ashes he had left behind, on the promise never to need a Whitmore again. And now here he was, inescapable, staring at her with the weight of years between them. She rose to her feet, but her knees trembled. "I'll leave," she said, voice clipped, though her pulse thundered. "Enjoy your evening, Ethan." But he didn't move aside. He stood, studying her as if she were both ghost and revelation. "I thought I'd imagined you," he murmured, almost to himself. "Every time the press put your face on a cover, I wondered if it was really you." She clenched her fists at her sides. "You wondered? That's rich. You had your chance to know me, Ethan. 15 years ago. You left me with nothing but a note." His expression flickered, pained for a fraction of a second, before the Whitmore mask reassembled. "It wasn't that simple." "It was exactly that simple," she said, fire finally breaking through her calm. "You walked away." The silence after her words was thunderous. The chandelier glittered above them like a frozen constellation, bearing witness to a confrontation a decade overdue. Ava's heart pounded with fury, with the sting of memories that had never dulled. She wanted to escape, but the gravity of the moment rooted her in place. The man who had once promised her forever now stood before her, not as a lover, not even as a stranger, but as a living reminder of everything she had survived. Outside, the horns of the harbor announced the ship's readiness for launch. Cameras waited, guests gathered, and Ava Carter's perfect narrative teetered on the edge of unraveling. And in that gilded suite, under Ethan Whitmore's gaze, the past she had buried rose to the surface, demanding to be reckoned with. Boston, winter of 2010, wore a cruel face. Snow gathered in thick layers along the sidewalks of Back Bay, frosting the Gothic towers with a deceptive charm. Inside Trinity Church, guests murmured beneath the vaulted ceiling, their voices mingling with the organ's warm chords. White roses lined the aisle. Candles flickered with promise. All eyes turned toward the front, where anticipation clung to the air like incense. Ava Carter, 23 and trembling in satin, stood in the side chamber, bouquet clutched in nervous fingers. She had dreamed of this day in fragments. Ethan waiting at the altar, a smile curving his lips, the life ahead of them stretching in luminous possibility. For a girl who had once stripped hotel beds in the Fairmont Copley, marrying into the Whitmore dynasty seemed like a door opening into a world she had never dared to claim. But the door never opened. Instead, a knock at the dressing room startled her. It wasn't Ethan. It was a man she barely recognized, one of the Whitmore attorneys. He handed her an envelope with the family crest pressed into the seal. His eyes, uncomfortable and evasive, refused to meet hers. Then he left her alone with the weight of wax and paper. Hands shaking, she tore it open. The note inside bore Ethan's handwriting, sharp and hurried. "You will never be accepted in my world. It's better this way." Her vision blurred. The words cut through her chest with surgical precision. In that instant, the church bells outside ceased to sound like celebration. They tolled like a funeral. She staggered, bouquet slipping from her grasp, petals scattering across the rug. The organist began to shift into the processional, unaware the bride had been abandoned. Ava wanted to scream, but no sound emerged. Only silence, heavy and suffocating, filled the chamber. She was not chosen. She was dismissed. By the time her friends reached her, she was already sinking beneath the tide of humiliation. Guests whispered. The Whitmore family closed ranks. Margaret Whitmore, statuesque in emerald silk, pressed lips into a thin smile and spoke words that lodged like glass. "This is for the best. You were never suitable." The fallout was swift and merciless. Within days, Ava lost her job at the Fairmont. No explanation was given, but she knew Margaret's shadow had stretched into the HR office. Landlords suddenly rescinded leases. Doors slammed in quiet, polite ways, leaving Ava with nowhere to turn. Boston's winter gnawed at her bones, and the grandeur of Trinity Church lingered like a cruel echo. She drifted through the South End, suitcase dragging behind her, until a women's shelter offered her a bed and a measure of safety. Nights were cold, but the kindness of strangers kept her upright. Her pride burned, yet necessity forced her to accept what was given. And in that fragile sanctuary, amid chipped paint and the hum of radiators, Ava learned resilience. Morning by morning, she pushed herself into interviews. The break came at Sunrise Cruises, a modest agency in a cramped office above a bakery. Its owner, Michael "Mike" Sanders, was a man with salt and pepper hair and a warmth that reminded her of a father she had lost too young. He didn't care about her scandal or her broken engagement. He saw hunger in her eyes and hired her to answer phones, file invoices, and greet clients. She worked with diligence, grateful for the lifeline. But Boston still whispered. Headlines called her the girl left at the altar, a curiosity in society columns. Strangers stared, half pity, half intrigue. Each headline reinforced the note Ethan had left. Each gaze pressed the wound deeper. She told herself she would heal, but the scar refused to fade. And then the test came. Weeks after joining Sunrise, Ava felt the nausea. Doctors confirmed what she hadn't dared imagine. She was pregnant. Triplets. 3 heartbeats flickering inside her like fragile lanterns. She sat in the clinic with the sonogram in hand, her entire world tilting. Fear coursed through her. How could she, a woman with no home and no wealth, carry the weight of 3 lives? She thought of Ethan. For one wild moment, she considered telling him. But when she tried, when she called the Whitmore offices, her call was rerouted to a lawyer. His tone was precise, rehearsed. Mr. Whitmore is unavailable. Any further attempts to contact him will be considered harassment. Please respect his wishes. Ava hung up. Something inside her hardened that day. The children would not be raised in shadows or shame. They would know love, even if it came only from her. She left the clinic resolved. Silence would not break her. If the Whitmores had shut every door, she would carve new ones into the world with her bare hands. Snow fell heavier that year, but beneath it, Ava's resolve burned like an ember refusing to die. The months that followed tested every fiber of Ava's endurance. Pregnancy with 3 lives was no quiet journey. It was a storm demanding strength she hadn't known she possessed. She balanced morning sickness with clerical duties at Sunrise, hiding her swelling belly beneath loose blouses until secrecy became impossible. When she finally confessed to Mike, expecting judgment, she was met with steady eyes and a firm nod. Family's not a burden, he told her. It's a compass. You'll find your way. Those words carried her through the nights when anxiety devoured her. She studied business textbooks borrowed from the library, finishing assignments to complete her long-delayed college degree. Between prenatal appointments, she devised ways to reinvent tourism. Why should excursions be cookie-cutter bus rides when travelers craved authenticity? She sketched ideas on notepads, walking tours through hidden alleys, dinners in family kitchens, art unveiled in secret studios. She believed luxury wasn't about price, it was about experience. When Noah, Aria, and Miles arrived, fragile yet fierce, her life cracked open. 3 cries echoed in the hospital room, and tears blurred her vision as she held them, one by one, against her chest. They were perfect, 3 pairs of blue eyes, luminous and questioning. She whispered promises into their tiny ears. You will never feel abandoned. You will never doubt your worth. You are my beginning and my destiny. Raising them alone demanded sacrifices Ava could scarcely measure. Sleep evaporated, money vanished into diapers and formula, and exhaustion became her constant shadow. Yet the sight of her children's faces turned despair into determination. She strapped them into second-hand strollers while attending classes, balancing laptops on cafeteria trays while feeding them. She pushed herself harder at Sunrise, climbing from receptionist to junior coordinator, crafting itineraries that impressed wealthy clients seeking more than ordinary cruises. But the world remained cruel. Occasionally, society columns resurfaced, whispering about her disgrace, speculating about her mysterious children. Margaret Whitmore's influence ensured silence from Ethan's side. To outsiders, Ava was simply a woman who had reinvented herself, but privately, she carried the burden of secrets too dangerous to expose. Her children's resemblance to the Whitmore lineage was undeniable. Their eyes betrayed the blood they carried. She prayed the world would not notice too soon. Conflict arose when the agency's conservative board dismissed her ideas as frivolous. Clients don't want risk, one executive said. They want comfort. Predictability sells. But Ava's instincts rebelled. Predictability was death in an era of curated luxury. She began guiding tours herself, testing her theories with small groups, blending history with storytelling, cuisine with culture. Guests returned dazzled, spreading word of her charisma and vision. Each success drew admiration from Mike, who offered her not just employment, but mentorship. Dream bigger, he urged. This industry rewards the bold, not the cautious. Ava clung to those words, even as she confronted the weight of unpaid bills, the exhaustion of motherhood, and the specter of Ethan haunting her memories. Her children grew into personalities vibrant and distinct. Noah tinkered with puzzles, his fingers already nimble with code. Aria listened intently to voices, mimicking accents, her gift for language blossoming. Miles sketched ships on scraps of paper, fascinated by design. Ava marveled at them, realizing they carried her resilience and his brilliance. She resolved that no Whitmore would ever claim their triumphs. They were Carter's, forged in fire, not entitled inheritance. Still, doubts lingered. On lonely nights, she replayed Trinity Church in her mind, the note burning like acid. She wondered what Ethan would say if he knew, if he saw the children he had unknowingly fathered. But when the thought threatened to soften her, she remembered the lawyer's voice, the dismissal, the cruelty of silence. Ethan had made his choice. She would make hers. And so Ava confronted the world, day by day, with a fragile army of 3 at her side and a vision crystallizing in her heart. The stage was set not for survival, but for revolution. By the time Ava's children celebrated their 5th birthday, Sunrise Cruises had become more than a job. It was the proving ground for the empire she envisioned. The small office buzzed with itineraries and bookings, but Ava saw beyond spreadsheets. She imagined an entire world where travel was no longer about sightseeing. It was about immersion. Mike encouraged her, but even his optimism was cautious. Clients aren't used to risk, he reminded her. They like knowing exactly what's waiting at port. Ava countered with results. Her pilot excursions, an underground jazz night in New Orleans, a hidden vineyard tour in Portugal, a clandestine gallery in Barcelona, were generating buzz. The reviews were effusive, life-changing, unforgettable, authentic. Yet with every step forward came resistance. Sunrise's senior board members muttered about liability and budgets. They dismissed Ava's methods as reckless experiments. One stormy afternoon, during a particularly tense meeting, a board member snapped, "You think you're the future of luxury? You're a single mother playing tour guide." The insult burned. Ava held her tongue, but inside, fire spread. She had spent years burying the humiliation of Trinity Church, of Margaret Whitmore's disdain. She refused to be dismissed again. That night, she sat at her kitchen table in the South End, her children asleep in their shared bedroom, and drafted a business plan on a laptop with a cracked screen. She outlined the Carter philosophy: curated intimacy, luxury as narrative, authenticity as the rarest commodity. She mapped out potential investors, cost breakdowns, branding strategies. And then, almost on impulse, she sent the document to a venture capitalist whose articles she had devoured during late-night study sessions, Samuel Brooks. Samuel was legendary in Boston, a contrarian investor, the son of immigrants, who had built a reputation on betting where no one else dared. Ava didn't expect a reply, but 3 days later, his assistant scheduled a meeting. At a coffee shop near Beacon Hill, Samuel arrived without fanfare, wearing jeans and a navy blazer. He scanned her plan with sharp eyes, then looked up. "You've got fire," he said, "and vision, but I don't invest in dreams. I invest in people. Tell me why you." Ava told him the truth, not the sanitized version, but the raw story. The church, the note, the triplets, the exile from Boston's elite. She didn't flinch when his eyebrows rose. She pressed forward, her voice steady. "I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking you to see what I've already built and what I can scale. I don't need a lifeline. I need a partner who understands that the future of travel isn't comfort, it's transformation." Samuel listened, silent, then closed the folder. "You remind me of myself," he said finally. "The establishment never saw me coming, either. They laughed until they couldn't afford to anymore." 2 weeks later, $500,000 hit her account. The news stunned Sunrise's board. Some scoffed, predicting disaster. Mike, however, hugged her in the office hallway. "Go build it," he said, eyes shining. "Don't wait for permission." Ava resigned from Sunrise the following month. She signed papers to acquire the agency outright, rebranding it under a new name, Carter Exclusive Experiences. The announcement rippled through industry circles. Some mocked the audacity of a single mother from Boston daring to enter the luxury market. Others, intrigued by whispers of her immersive itineraries, leaned closer. But for Ava, the decision wasn't about critics or applause. It was about rewriting her destiny. She had been abandoned at the altar. She had been silenced by lawyers. She had been erased by Margaret Whitmore's machinations. Now she was carving her name into the world with the same force that had once tried to bury her. The triplets watched her with fascination, their curiosity boundless. Noah tinkered with the agency's primitive booking software, making suggestions no adult would think to consider. Arya learned greetings in multiple languages, practicing on clients at the office. Miles sketched logo ideas in spiral notebooks, one of which, an infinity loop stylized into a wave, would later inspire Carter Global's emblem. For the first time since Trinity Church, Ava felt not just survival, but momentum. A turn had come. Unexpected. Unstoppable. The launch of Carter exclusive experiences ignited both excitement and conflict. Ava's first challenge was staffing. She hired young guides eager for adventure, linguists, historians, chefs willing to open their kitchens. But not everyone believed in her vision. Some former Sunrise employees refused to follow her, muttering about her gamble. Even old friends questioned whether she was sacrificing stability for fantasy. Mike remained steadfast. Though retired, he visited her office weekly, his advice grounding her flights of ambition. Every empire is built on allies, he reminded her. Choose carefully. Ava did. She courted local artisans in every port, forming partnerships that gave her tours authenticity money couldn't fake. A violinist in Vienna, a fisherman in Santorini, a street poet in Havana, each became part of her growing tapestry. Clients marveled not just at destinations, but at the intimacy of human connection. Word spread, but divisions surfaced, too. Competitors scoffed at her gimmicks. Luxury consortiums closed ranks, dismissing her as a novelty. Even within her team, doubts lingered. Late one night, after a grueling day, her operations manager confronted her. You're pushing too far. The industry doesn't move this fast. Clients want predictability, Ava. You're going to scare them off. Ava steadied her voice, though exhaustion gnawed at her. Predictability is death. If they wanted predictability, they'd stay home. Her children became both refuge and reminder of purpose. Noah, now 9, built rudimentary apps to organize itineraries, teaching himself code from online tutorials. Arya astonished guides by mediating disputes in multiple languages, her diplomatic nature already evident. Miles refined his sketches, dreaming of ships and structures. Each of them reflected Ava's relentless energy, yet each also carried Ethan's unmistakable gaze, the piercing blue eyes that were both gift and ghost. Then came the gala in New York, where Carter Exclusive Experiences was shortlisted for an Innovation Award. Ava arrived in a crimson gown, her presence commanding. Investors circled, journalists whispered. Amid the clinking of glasses, she felt the sting of Margaret Whitmore's absence like a phantom, because Margaret's network was everywhere. Some guests smiled too politely, others turned away. She knew whose hands still tightened invisible strings. But Samuel Brooks was there, glass raised in salute. Ignore the gatekeepers, he told her. You're not here to join their club. You're here to make them obsolete. That night, Ava caught her reflection in the hotel mirror. The satin dress shimmered, the scars of the past hidden beneath. She thought of Trinity Church, of snow, of silence. And she realized, every alliance she forged, every division she provoked, was proof she had already crossed the threshold. There was no going back, only forward. The headquarters of Carter Exclusive Experiences in downtown Boston bore little resemblance to the cramped Sunrise office Ava had once inherited. Glass walls gleamed with sunlight, a boutique fleet of ships displayed on illuminated panels, and assistants hustled through corridors with tablets full of reservations from clients whose names now filled society pages. Yet amid the elegance, Ava carried a secret more fragile than any corporate venture, her children's true lineage. Noah, Arya, and Miles were 14 now, prodigies in their own right. Their talents had become threads woven into the company itself. Noah's code quietly running internal systems. Arya's fluency smoothing negotiations with foreign officials. Miles's design sketches shaping the interiors of Carter's newest yachts. To the world, they were simply the Carter triplets, an inspiring anecdote for journalists who praised Ava as a symbol of single-mother triumph. Few questioned their father's absence. Those who did received evasive answers. But Ava knew secrecy could not last forever. The children's blue eyes betrayed them. Icy, unmistakable, Whitmore blue. More than once, an investor or journalist had tilted their head, as if connecting an unspoken dot. Ava deflected with charm. but each instance stoked her dread. That dread sharpened the night Samuel Brooks invited her to a private dinner at his penthouse overlooking the Charles River. Candlelight glowed against floor-to-ceiling windows, and as the plates of seared salmon were cleared, Samuel leaned back. "You've built an empire," he said, admiration softening his usually sharp tone. "But empires invite scrutiny. You know that." "I've survived scrutiny before," Ava replied. "Not like this." Samuel's eyes were steady. "There are whispers, Ava. About the children. About their father. People love a mystery, but markets don't. Eventually, someone will connect the dots." Her throat tightened. "If they do, then you'll face a storm. But storms aren't always bad. Sometimes they clear the sky." She bristled. "You don't understand." "I understand more than you think," Samuel said quietly. "I built myself from nothing, and people still ask about the father who abandoned me. They want neat narratives. But neat doesn't win wars. You decide how to tell the story before someone else does." That night, Ava lay awake, staring at the city lights beyond her bedroom window. For 14 years, she had carried the silence like a shield. But now, with Carter Exclusive preparing to launch its crown jewel, the Infinity Experience, a ship valued at $1.2 billion, she feared the silence might shatter not on her terms, but on someone else's. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Ethan Whitmore was preparing for his own expansion. After years of corporate battles, he had ascended to CEO of Whitmore Properties. Unlike his father, who had built skyscrapers as monuments, Ethan sought ports, terminals, and logistics. He spoke of a future where control of harbors meant control of commerce. Trade publications praised his vision, but skeptics whispered that he was stretching too far. One morning, while reviewing a portfolio of Caribbean projects, Ethan paused at a familiar name, Carter Global Experiences. The dossier listed acquisition of boutique ships, expansion into luxury terminals, and the impending launch of the Infinity. Ethan stared at the name until the letters blurred. Carter. Ava. He closed the folder quickly, as if burned. He told himself it was coincidence. That Carter was a common enough name. Yet something gnawed at him. When he glimpsed her in a trade magazine weeks later, poised and luminous, holding court at a New York gala, denial became impossible. Ava Carter was no coincidence. She was a force. And with her image came memories. Snow, roses, the note he had written with a hand that shook more than he admitted. He had told himself he had freed her, spared her from a life shackled to his family's expectations. But seeing her triumph, without him, perhaps in spite of him, roused both shame and something darker, something that felt like longing. The secret Ava had guarded so fiercely now pressed against the edges of fate. For as Ethan traced the contours of her empire, the lines of their destinies began to converge once more. Miami pulsed with heat and anticipation. The Infinity Experience loomed like a palace upon the waves, draped in lights, every deck prepared for unveiling. Politicians, celebrities, billionaires, and journalists flooded the city for the christening of the most expensive cruise ship ever built. For Ava, the night marked the culmination of 15 years of resilience. Every betrayal, every sacrifice, every sleepless night had led here. Carter Global Experiences was no longer a rising star. It was the star, the company others scrambled to imitate. She dressed in midnight blue silk, her hair swept into a crown, her children at her side. Noah carried a tablet. Aria charmed diplomats in French. Miles sketched the ship's silhouette as if capturing history in pencil. She reviewed the guest list one last time before stepping onto the red carpet. In her fatigue, she missed a name, Ethan Whitmore. The oversight was fatal. For Ethan, the invitation had arrived through corporate channels. His company had invested in port expansions aligned with the Infinity's routes. Attending was not only logical, it was expected. Yet when he read Carter Global Experiences, something more personal pulled him across the country. He arrived in a tailored tuxedo, Vanessa Crane, his socialite ex-wife, conspicuously absent. Flashes of cameras followed him. The heir turned CEO, the man whose presence at any event shifted headlines. He had come for business. He told himself that. And yet, when his driver pulled up to the Infinity's towering hull, he could not deny the knot in his chest. Inside the ship, Ava navigated the labyrinthine corridors, exhaustion from weeks of planning weighing on her bones. She sought her suite, desperate for one moment of stillness before the gala began. She keyed in the code, stepped inside, and surrendered to the sofa's embrace. Her eyes fluttered shut. When they opened, Ethan stood before her. For a suspended instant, the years collapsed. Boston returned, the note, the humiliation. Their gazes locked like blades crossing. Neither spoke first. The silence held them hostage. Finally, Ethan broke it. Ava. Her name in his voice was a wound reopened. She rose unsteadily. This is my suite. He shook his head. No, it's mine. The realization struck them both. Fate had conspired in corridors too vast to map. Ava, who had built her empire on escape, had walked straight into the man she had sworn never to see again. Ethan, who had told himself he had buried the past, now faced the woman who had transformed it into legend. Outside, music swelled, the gala preparing to erupt in spectacle. But in that gilded suite, time contracted. The air between them thickened with everything unsaid: betrayal, pride, longing, and the secret Ava guarded with her life. She tried to step past him, but he blocked the door, not with force, but with presence. We can't pretend this didn't happen, he said. Her pulse raced. We already did. 15 years ago. Ethan's jaw clenched, but before he could reply, the ship's intercom announced, "Guests, please proceed to the grand deck for the opening ceremony." It was too late. The collision had begun. There would be no turning back. The grand deck of the Infinity Experience glittered beneath a canopy of stars. Champagne flutes sparkled in manicured hands, camera drones hovered like mechanical fireflies, and the Miami skyline pulsed in neon rhythm across the horizon. Politicians delivered speeches about economic growth, celebrities offered rehearsed quips, and Ava Carter glided through the crowd like a queen surveying her kingdom. Yet her heart remained locked in the suite where Ethan Whitmore's voice had cut through 15 years of silence. She told herself she could compartmentalize, that one accidental encounter could be buried beneath the noise of the launch. But the truth lingered in every glance, every whisper. Ethan was here. She saw him across the deck, speaking with senators, photographers circling like sharks. His smile was practiced, but his eyes, those eyes she knew too well, kept straying toward her. Each time their gazes brushed, a current passed between them, invisible yet undeniable. The triplets sensed it. Arya tugged her sleeve during a lull between speeches. "Who is that man staring at you?" Ava's breath caught. "No one important," she lied, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Noah's eyes narrowed, analytical, while Miles followed the exchange with quiet intensity. They didn't press her, but the seed of curiosity was planted. When the ribbon-cutting commenced, Ava stood at the podium, her voice carrying over the waves. "This ship is more than steel and glass," she declared. "It is proof that authenticity is the new luxury. It is proof that dreams built in the shadows can rise to light." Applause thundered. Fireworks erupted from barges anchored nearby, painting the night sky crimson and gold. Cameras immortalized her as the embodiment of triumph. Yet amid the spectacle, she caught sight of Ethan slipping toward the edge of the deck, his expression unreadable. Later, as guests danced and orchestras played, Ava retreated for air. She found herself near the observation deck, moonlight spilling across the sea. Ethan stood there, hands braced on the railing, suit jacket undone. "You stole the night," he said without turning. She froze. "I built the night." He looked at her then, the weight of years etched into his face. "You've become everything I thought you couldn't." Her anger flared. "And you've become exactly what I always knew you would. A Whitmore." His lips pressed thin, but he didn't argue. Instead, he asked quietly, "Are they mine?" The question sliced her in half. She had spent 14 years preparing for this moment, and yet nothing prepared her for hearing it spoken aloud. "They're mine," she said firmly. The silence after her words carried more weight than any argument. Ethan studied her, pain flashing in his eyes, but before he could press further, footsteps approached. A cluster of journalists rounded the corner, cameras ready. Ava stepped back, Ethan straightened his tie, and in seconds the moment was masked beneath polite smiles. But the consequences had already begun. By morning, gossip columns buzzed. Photographers captured too many stolen glances between Ava and Ethan, their proximity too charged to dismiss. Headlines speculated, tourism queen and real estate heir, old sparks? Stock tickers twitched. Whitmore Properties shares dipped as rumors of distraction swirled. Carter Global's value, by contrast, ticked upward, Ava's image burnished by the suggestion of resilience in the face of history. The past had crashed into the present, and the fallout was only beginning. The following days unfolded in chaos. What should have been a victory lap for Carter Global became a media circus. Paparazzi swarmed the Infinity's every port of call, cameras straining for glimpses of Ava and Ethan in the same frame. Hashtags trended, analysts pontificated, and Ava's carefully constructed narrative teetered on the edge of exposure. Her children felt it most. At breakfast in the ship's private dining hall, Noah scrolled through headlines on his tablet. "Why do they keep linking you to him?" he demanded, frustration sharpening his voice. Arya set down her fork. "Because there's something you're not telling us." Miles, quieter, whispered, "Is he our father?" The question shattered Ava's composure. She looked at their faces, 3 pairs of blue eyes reflecting suspicion and hurt, and realized the truth she had buried for so long was clawing its way to daylight. She wanted to protect them from the cruelty of the Whitmores, from the betrayal of Trinity Church. But lies, even protective ones, had limits. Before she could answer, the door opened. Ethan stood there, drawn by some magnetic force neither of them could resist. The children turned toward him, the resemblance undeniable now that they were side by side. The silence stretched. Noah was the first to speak. "You." Ethan's breath caught. "Yes." Ava rose, fury and fear mingling. "You don't get to walk in here and claim them." "I'm not claiming," Ethan said, voice raw. "I'm recognizing." "God, Ava there." "Don't say it," she snapped. But it was too late. Cameras outside the dining hall caught the raised voices, the tension, the fragments of words. Within hours, footage leaked onto social media. Ava Carter confronting Ethan Whitmore while 3 teenagers looked on. The internet did the rest. Triplets with Whitmore eyes. The abandoned bride's revenge. Corporate scandal or family tragedy. Whitmore Properties stock plummeted, billions in value evaporating overnight. Margaret Whitmore convened an emergency board meeting, furious. Vanessa Crane, Ethan's ex-wife, issued a statement distancing herself. Analysts called it the Infinity Scandal. But Ava's image soared. To millions, she was no longer just the woman left at the altar. She was the phoenix who had risen higher than those who tried to break her. Hashtags celebrating her flooded feeds. Hashtag Ava Strong. Hashtag Carter Legacy. Hashtag Infinity Queen. For Ava, the attention was suffocating. She hadn't sought to humiliate Ethan or to expose her children to the world's hunger for spectacle. Yet the truth, once buried, was now public domain. And in the wreckage of reputation and finance, one undeniable fact emerged. The future of her children could no longer be separated from the man who had abandoned them. The reckoning had arrived. The Infinity Experience sailed through the Caribbean, its decks buzzing with guests, journalists, and an invisible storm building in the wake of revelation. Every port brought more cameras, every headline another variation of the same story. Ava Carter, abandoned bride turned empire builder, and Ethan Whitmore, the man who had left her with a note, now entangled in a scandal 15 years in the making. Behind the polished veneer, Ava braced for war. She spent hours with her legal team, anticipating attacks from the Whitmores. Margaret's influence was legendary. Judges, politicians, old money donors. Ava knew the matriarch would not sit quietly while the Carter triplets became the living evidence of Whitmore betrayal. In Boston, Margaret's wrath erupted. She gathered the Whitmore board in a mahogany-paneled room, her voice slicing like glass. "This woman is exploiting our name. She will destroy us if we let her." She demanded Ethan deny paternity, issue statements, regain control. But Ethan refused. "I won't lie," he said, to the astonishment of every executive. "They're mine." Margaret's face blanched. "You will not dismantle generations of legacy for her mistake." Ethan's jaw hardened. The mistake wasn't her. It was me. It was us. It was the first fracture in the Whitmore dynasty that Margaret could not glue back together. On the ship, Ava sought refuge on the observation deck, where waves fanned out like liquid glass. Samuel Brooks joined her, his hands tucked in his pockets. "The storm's coming to a head," he said. "Margaret's not the type to surrender." "I don't want surrender," Ava replied. "I want survival." For my children. Samuel studied her, then nodded. Survival isn't enough for you, Ava. It never was. This is about authorship. You get to decide whether your story ends as scandal or as legacy. Later that evening, Ava gathered Noah, Arya, and Miles in her suite. The triplets sat in silence, the weight of headlines pressing heavier than any teenage drama. I kept the truth from you. Ava began, voice steady despite the tremor beneath. I thought I was protecting you. I see now I was protecting myself. Arya's eyes glistened. We deserve to know. You're right, Ava said. And you deserve to choose how much of him you let into your lives. He is your father, but he doesn't define you. You define yourselves. Miles, ever quiet, looked at her sketches on the table. Do we have to hate him? Ava hesitated, then shook her head. No, but you don't have to forgive him either. Forgiveness is an obligation. It's choice. The words steadied them, though uncertainty lingered. Outside, the Infinity's gala hall filled with dignitaries for the ship's Caribbean showcase. Ava dressed in silver, armor shimmering under chandeliers. She knew Margaret Whitmore would not stay silent forever. The confrontation was coming, and Ava was ready. The gala unfolded like theater, chandeliers blazing, strings swelling, and every eye fixed on the two figures destined to collide. Ava Carter stood at the center, poised, her children at her side. Across the hall, Ethan Whitmore entered, the air crackling as conversation stuttered. Margaret appeared moments later, emerald silk draped across her shoulders, her entrance commanding silence. Cameras swung, journalists gasped. The Whitmore matriarch had come to strike. She crossed the room with regal precision, her gaze locked on Ava. You think you've won, Margaret said, her voice low but audible to the microphones eager to capture every word. You've paraded your scandal for sympathy, but legacy does not bend to spectacle. My family will not be humiliated. A hush fell. Ava straightened, fire flashing in her eyes. Your family humiliated me when you pulled the strings to destroy my job, my home, my future. You silenced me, erased me, and thought I would vanish. But I built something stronger than your legacy. I built my own. The crowd rippled with gasps. Margaret's lips tightened. You are nothing but a maid who clawed her way into a world that never wanted her. Ethan stepped forward, breaking from his mother's side. Enough. She is the mother of my children, and she is more than anything you or I will ever be. She built what we never could. The declaration exploded across the room, microphones feeding it instantly to the world. Guests whispered furiously, cameras zoomed, and social media lit like wildfire. Ethan Whitmore admits paternity of Carter triplets. Margaret's composure cracked. For the first time, her mask slipped, revealing raw fury. She raised her voice, trembling with rage. You've destroyed us. No, Ava said softly, but firmly, her voice carrying over the crowd. You destroyed yourself when you believed power meant erasing others. Tonight isn't about me versus you. It's about showing the world that resilience builds stronger legacies than privilege ever will. The orchestra faltered, then silence engulfed the hall. For a heartbeat, all that remained was Ava's voice, ringing like steel wrapped in silk. The moment was captured in countless lenses, broadcast instantly across the globe. Whitmore Properties shares plunged further by the hour. But Carter Global soared, investors rallying behind the vision of a woman who had faced humiliation and turned it into empire. For Ethan, the moment was both ruin and revelation. He had admitted the truth, and in doing so, severed himself from the dynasty that had once defined him. For Ava, it was vindication, not as revenge, but as proof that she no longer lived in the shadow of the Whitmores. And for the triplets, it was the unmasking of the man behind their mother's silence. Their father stood not as myth or secret, but as a flawed figure exposed to the light. The confrontation was over. The consequences, however, had only just begun. The days following the gala felt like a hurricane. News cycles looped the footage of Ethan's public confession and Margaret's furious collapse. Stock analysts spoke of a Whitmore implosion, while Carter Global surged as the face of reinvention. Ava found herself on every magazine cover, hailed as an icon of resilience. But for her, triumph tasted bittersweet. She hadn't wanted her children thrust into headlines. She hadn't asked for Ethan's penance to play out on the world stage. The triplets were caught in the eye of the storm. At school, classmates whispered, teachers stared too long, and even friends seemed uncertain. Noah buried himself in code, building firewalls to shield their devices from relentless paparazzi. Arya spoke with the poise of a diplomat, fielding invasive questions with calm but razor-sharp answers. Miles retreated into design, sketching concepts for spaces where privacy could exist like sanctuary. They adapted, but Ava saw the toll it took. One evening, Ethan requested a meeting. Against her instincts, Ava agreed, for the children's sake. They gathered in a quiet lounge aboard the Infinity, away from cameras. Ethan sat before them, stripped of Whitmore arrogance. "I can't change the past," he began, voice heavy. "I can't undo what I did. But I want to be part of your future, if you'll let me." Noah stared at him, expression unreadable. "You don't get to just walk in now." "I know," Ethan admitted. "That's why I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance." Arya folded her arms. "A chance you threw away once already." Miles, the gentlest, finally spoke. "What are you offering?" Ethan hesitated, then produced a folder. "A trust. For your education, your future, whatever you choose. It's the least I can do." Ava's jaw tightened. She recognized the tactic. Money as apology, wealth as bandage. But before she could refuse, Noah spoke first. "We don't need your money," he said, eyes blazing. "We need purpose." Arya leaned forward, seizing the moment. "If you want to give something, then give it to people who were abandoned like Mom was. Like us. Families who need help, not headlines." Miles slid one of his sketches across the table, a building labeled New Horizon Foundation. Ethan looked down, then up, surprised. "A foundation?" "Yes," Arya said firmly. "For single mothers. For kids who need a start. You want to do something real? Fund this. But it won't be yours. It'll be ours." The air stilled. Ava's heart swelled with pride as she watched her children transform pain into vision, turning scars into blueprints. Ethan, silent, finally nodded. "Then it's yours. All of it. Tell me what you need, and I'll sign it over." The foundation launched within months. Press releases framed it as Ethan's atonement, but insiders knew the truth. It was the triplets' creation, guided by Ava's steady hand. The New Horizon Foundation quickly gained traction, funneling resources to shelters, scholarships, and community programs. For every mother standing alone, for every child needing a chance, there was now a beacon. Margaret Whitmore tried once more to strike, issuing statements dripping with venom. But the backlash was swift. Social media skewered her, investors distanced themselves, and even Whitmore loyalists whispered about her irrelevance. The dynasty she had fought to preserve crumbled under the weight of its own cruelty. Ava did not celebrate her downfall. She had no need. Victory was not in Margaret's defeat. It was in her children's triumph. On the final night of the Infinity's inaugural voyage, Ava stood on the ship's highest deck. The sea stretched endless beneath a velvet sky, stars mirrored in dark water. Behind her, laughter echoed, Noah demonstrating code to crew members, Arya translating a conversation between diplomats, Miles exploring the bridge with designers who marveled at his sketches. They were no longer shadows of a secret. They were legacies in their own right. Ethan approached quietly, stopping a respectful distance away. "They're extraordinary," he said softly. "They always were," Ava replied, her gaze fixed on the horizon. He waited, perhaps hoping for more. But Ava remained still, serene. She had drawn her boundaries, and he understood. His place, if any, would be defined not by her forgiveness but by their choice. As dawn painted the ocean in hues of gold, Ava closed her eyes and breathed deeply. 15 years ago, snow had fallen on a church in Boston, and her world had collapsed with the stroke of a pen. Tonight, on a ship bearing her name and vision, she had rewritten that world. Not as revenge, not even as survival, but as authorship. She opened her eyes, watching the triplets lean over the bridge's railing, pointing toward the future. The Infinity cut through the waves, not as a symbol of wealth, but as testament to resilience, love, and destiny claimed. Ava Carter smiled. The horizon was theirs. If you made it this far, leave us a comment telling us where you're watching from today and what you thought of the story. If you can, share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to receive new videos. A big hug, and see you tomorrow.